What's up, guys? Let's go start it.
Ethan had always been fast. Ever since he was a kid, he loved the feeling of wind rushing past his face as his feet pounded the track. People said he was a natural. Coaches praised his speed, and teammates envied his effortless stride. But lately, things felt different. High school track had been easy. College track was a different beast. Every morning, Ethan's alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m. for practice, and every morning he hit snooze. The thrill he used to feel stepping onto the track had faded. Now, his legs felt heavy, and his mind was constantly tired. One rainy afternoon, after dragging himself through another lackluster practice, Ethan slumped onto the bleachers. His coach, Coach Davis, approached him. The man had a quiet intensity about him, never raised his voice, but every word carried weight. "Rough day?" Davis asked, sitting down beside him. Ethan sighed. "I don't know, Coach. I just don't feel motivated anymore." Coach Davis nodded slowly, as if he'd heard these words 100 times before. "Motivation, huh?" He scratched his chin. "You think that's what makes a great athlete?" Ethan frowned. "Isn't it?" Coach leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Let me tell you something, Ethan. Motivation is like a spark. It'll light the fire, sure. But what happens when the spark dies out?" He gestured toward the track. "Discipline is what keeps the fire burning. Motivation might get you started, but discipline is what keeps you going." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "But what if I don't feel like running?" Coach Davis turned to him, eyes steady. "You don't wait until you feel like running. You run. Every day, rain or shine, whether you're tired, bored, or inspired." He stood, patting Ethan on the shoulder. "Show up tomorrow. Don't think. Just show up." The next morning, Ethan's alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m. He stared at the ceiling. His body begged him to stay in bed. But then he heard Coach's words in his head. "Don't think. Just show up." One foot on the floor, Ethan told himself. He sat up. Then he stood. Step by step, he found himself lacing up his shoes, stepping into the cold morning air, and jogging toward the track. He didn't feel motivated, but he showed up. And that was the first step. The next few mornings felt like a battle. Ethan's body protested every step out of bed, every stride on the track. The thrill of running was gone, replaced by aching muscles and heavy eyelids. But every day, he heard Coach Davis's voice in his head. "Don't think. Just show up." So he showed up. At first, Ethan went through the motions. His times weren't improving, and his heart wasn't in it. But Coach Davis never scolded him. He simply watched, observed. Occasionally, he'd offer quiet advice. Lift your knees a little higher, or relax your shoulders. Little things that made Ethan feel like his effort wasn't invisible. One morning, after a particularly grueling workout, Ethan collapsed onto the grass, panting. Sweat poured down his face, and every muscle screamed in protest. Coach Davis knelt beside him, offering a water bottle. "Hard, isn't it?" Coach said. Ethan nodded between gasps. "Why does it feel harder every day?" Coach chuckled. "Because you're waiting for it to get easier. It won't." He leaned back, looking up at the sky. Discipline isn't about making things easy. It's about doing the hard stuff, even when you don't want to. Especially when you don't want to. Ethan stared at the clouds, feeling the weight of those words settle into his chest. He realized he'd been chasing the wrong thing. He'd been waiting for the return of that spark, that rush of motivation he used to feel. But maybe Coach was right. Maybe the secret wasn't in feeling inspired. Maybe it was just in showing up. From that day on, Ethan stopped fighting the mornings. He still didn't love waking up early, but he didn't dread it anymore. It became automatic. Alarm, feet on the floor, shoes on, out the door. No thinking, no questioning. And slowly, almost without realizing it, something changed. His stride grew stronger. His breathing steadied. His times improved. It wasn't dramatic, but it was steady. Each day built on the last, like bricks in a wall. There were no bursts of inspiration, no sudden breakthroughs. Just quiet progress. One afternoon, Coach Davis pulled him aside after practice. "You're starting to get it," he said. "Get what?" Ethan asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Coach smiled. "The difference between wanting to run and being a runner." Ethan blinked. "What's the difference?" Coach clapped a hand on his shoulder. "A runner doesn't wait to feel ready. He just runs." Ethan felt those words sink into his bones. He wasn't waiting anymore. He was running. And for the first time in a long time, he felt proud of that. Weeks passed, and Ethan's body adapted to the grind. The early mornings weren't as hard anymore. They were routine. He didn't think about it. He just did it. His times were improving, his endurance was building, and even his teammates started to notice the change. "Man, what's gotten into you?" his friend Jordan asked after practice one day. "You've been on fire lately." Ethan shrugged. "Just showing up." Jordan laughed. "Well, whatever it is, keep doing it." But then came the wall. It hit without warning. One morning, Ethan laced up his shoes like always, but his legs felt heavier than usual. Practice dragged. His time slowed. He chalked it up to a bad day. Then it happened again. And again. No matter how hard he pushed, his body felt sluggish. Every run felt like moving through quicksand. His mind started whispering doubts. Maybe you're not good enough. Maybe this is your limit. One morning, he stood at the edge of the track, hands on his hips, staring at the lanes. The sky was still dark, the air cool. He felt nothing. No spark. No drive. Just a quiet voice in his head telling him to go home. For the first time in weeks, Ethan hesitated. He turned toward the parking lot. Giving up, the voice stopped him in his tracks. Coach Davis stood a few feet away, arms crossed. Ethan sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Coach. I just don't feel it anymore." Coach studied him for a long moment, then walked over and stood beside him. "Let me tell you something about runners, Ethan. Everyone hits a wall. Most people stop. The ones who succeed." He nodded toward the track. "They run through it." Ethan frowned. "But how? What if I can't?" Coach Davis clapped a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to feel like you can. You just have to try." Ethan looked at the track again. It felt endless. Impossible. But he took a breath. Stepped onto the lane. One foot in front of the other. He ran. It wasn't pretty. His legs burned. His lungs screamed. Every step felt wrong. But he kept going. He didn't quit. When he crossed the finish line, he collapsed onto the grass, chest heaving. Coach Davis crouched beside him. "That," he said quietly, "is discipline." Ethan stared at the sky, heart pounding. Maybe he hadn't felt like running today, but he ran anyway. And somehow, that felt even better than winning. The wall didn't vanish overnight. Every morning was a fight. But Ethan showed up, even when his legs ached, even when his mind whispered, "Why bother?" He laced up his shoes and stepped onto the track. One day, after a grueling practice, Ethan sat on the bleachers, pouring water over his head. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the lanes. Coach Davis sat down beside him. "You're still here?" Coach said. Ethan huffed a laugh. "Barely." Coach smiled. "You know, most people think discipline is about forcing yourself to do things you hate. But that's not quite right." He gestured toward the track. "Discipline is about building a system, a habit, so you don't have to think. You don't rely on feelings. You rely on the process." Ethan wiped his face with his shirt. "But what if the process sucks?" Coach chuckled. "It does. But here's the secret. When you stop waiting for it to feel good and just do it anyway, something changes. One day, you realize you don't need motivation anymore." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Coach leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Motivation is like a friend who shows up when things are easy. Discipline is the friend who stays when things get hard." Ethan let that sink in. He thought about all the mornings he dragged himself out of bed, all the times he ran when his body screamed at him to stop. He hadn't felt motivated, but he'd done it anyway. And slowly, something had shifted. The weight of waiting for motivation had lifted. The routine had become automatic. Ethan wasn't running because he felt like it. He was running because that's who he was. That night, Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel dread for tomorrow's practice. He didn't feel excited either. He just felt steady, like there was no question about what he had to do. The next morning, his alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m. Ethan sat up, swung his legs out of bed, and put on his shoes. No hesitation. No questions. Just action. Ethan's routine became second nature. Wake up. Lace up. Show up. The track no longer felt like a burden. It felt like home. His teammates noticed the change. Jordan jogged up beside him one morning, breath puffing in the cold air. "You're a machine, man. I swear, you never slow down." Ethan smirked. "Not a machine. Just disciplined." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "Is that what Coach Davis has been preaching?" Ethan nodded. "Motivation gets you started. Discipline keeps you going." Jordan laughed. "Sounds like a fortune cookie." But it wasn't just words. Ethan felt it. The wall he'd hit weeks ago wasn't gone. He'd just learned how to run through it. He stopped waiting for the perfect conditions. He didn't care if it was raining, if he was tired, or if he felt uninspired. He ran. Every day. No excuses. One afternoon, Coach Davis called the team together. "All right, listen up," he said, arms crossed. "The state championship is in 3 weeks. We've been building all season for this. If you want it, you have to earn it." The team buzzed with excitement, but Ethan felt something deeper, resolve. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't hyped. He was steady, focused. After practice, Coach Davis pulled him aside. "You ready for this?" Ethan met his gaze. "I've been ready." Coach grinned. "I know." In the days leading up to the championship, Ethan trained harder than ever. He pushed his limits, sprinted until his lungs burned, and showed up when others made excuses. The night before the race, he sat alone in the locker room, staring at his worn-out running shoes. He thought about everything. The mornings he wanted to quit, the moments he doubted himself, the lessons Coach Davis had taught him. Motivation had gotten him here once, but discipline had kept him going. He took a deep breath. Tomorrow wasn't about winning. It was about proving something to himself, that he was more than the spark. He was the fire. The stadium buzzed with energy. Athletes warmed up on the track, stretching and jogging in tight lanes. Spectators filled the stands, their cheers echoing through the crisp morning air. Ethan stood near the starting line, bouncing on the balls of his feet, feeling the familiar thrum of his heart against his ribs. But this time, it wasn't nerves. It was focus. Coach Davis appeared at his side, arms crossed. "How you feeling?" Ethan shrugged. "Ready." Coach nodded. "Remember, don't think about the finish line. Just run your race." Ethan breathed deep and nodded back. The call to the starting blocks came over the loudspeaker. He stepped onto the track and knelt, fingers pressing into the cool surface. The world shrank to the lane in front of him. Breathe. Focus. Show up. The starting gun fired. Ethan exploded off the blocks. The pounding of feet and the roar of the crowd faded into silence. It was just him and the track. His legs moved on their own, powerful, steady. Each stride was the result of months of work. Every early morning, every aching muscle, every moment of doubt had led him here. The other runners surged forward, but Ethan didn't panic. He kept his pace, trusting his body. "Don't think. Just run." As they rounded the final curve, something clicked. His mind went quiet, his body light. He pushed harder, each step eating up the ground beneath him. One by one, he passed his competitors. The finish line rushed toward him. With one last burst, Ethan lunged forward, crossing the line in a blur. He stumbled, gasping for air, and collapsed onto the grass. For a moment, everything was still. Then the crowd erupted. Jordan sprinted over, grabbing him by the shoulders. "Ethan, you did it. You freaking did it." Ethan blinked, chest heaving. What place?" Jordan laughed. "First man. You won." Ethan stared up at the sky, the weight of it all crashing over him. Not the victory, but the journey. The mornings he showed up when he didn't want to. The days he ran through exhaustion. The lessons Coach Davis had drilled into him. It wasn't motivation that brought him here. It was every single step he took when no one was watching. Coach Davis knelt beside him, a proud smile on his face. "Told you," he said quietly. "Discipline makes motivation unnecessary." Ethan smiled. "Yeah, I get it now." As the crowd cheered and his teammates celebrated, Ethan sat quietly, feeling more than victorious. He felt unstoppable. The championship win felt surreal. For days, Ethan floated through a haze of congratulations and celebrations. Teachers, classmates, even strangers stopped him in the hallways to shake his hand. Local news ran a feature on the comeback kid. But the high didn't last. One morning, about a week after the race, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his running shoes. The alarm had gone off, just like always. His body felt rested, his mind clear, but something was missing. There was no race to train for. No next goal. What now? For the first time in months, he didn't lace up his shoes. He just lay back down and closed his eyes. The next day was the same. And the next. By the end of the week, the familiar weight of inertia settled over him. The discipline he'd built felt distant. Without a target, the fire dimmed. One afternoon, Coach Davis called him over after school. "Haven't seen you on the track lately," Coach said, leaning against the fence. "Everything okay?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know. don't feel the push anymore. Coach studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Let me tell you something, Ethan. People think discipline is about pushing through when you don't want to. And it is, but it's more than that. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Coach gestured to the empty track. Discipline isn't just about showing up. It's about choosing to show up. Every day, even when there's no finish line. Ethan sighed. But what's the point if there's no goal? Coach chuckled. The goal isn't the point. The process is. Ethan looked at the track, the sun casting long shadows across the lanes. He thought about all those mornings he'd shown up when he didn't want to. He thought about the pain, the sweat, the victories, big and small. Maybe the race had ended. But the runner? The runner kept going. The next morning, Ethan's alarm buzzed. He sat up, swung his legs out of bed, and stared at his shoes. No races, no goals, no pressure, just the track. And him. He laced up, stepped outside, breathed in the morning air, and ran, not because he had to, but because he could. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting golden streaks across the empty track. Ethan's feet pounded steadily against the ground, his breath rhythmic, his mind clear. No finish line, no crowd, just him and the road. The days had blurred into a steady rhythm. Wake up, lace up, run. Some mornings felt easy, his legs light as air. Other mornings dragged, each step heavier than the last. But it didn't matter. He showed up. One evening after practice, Ethan found Coach Davis sitting on the bleachers, watching the sky darken. Ethan plopped down next to him, both staring at the fading sunlight. Coach broke the silence. You're still running. Ethan smiled. Yeah, guess I am. Coach nodded. So what's next? Ethan thought about it for a moment. The old him would have scrambled to find a new goal, another race, another challenge. But now, he just shrugged. Does there have to be a next? Coach chuckled. Not at all. He looked out over the track. Most people think they need a destination to keep going. But you figured out the truth. Ethan glanced at him. And what's that? Coach smiled. The road itself is enough. They sat in silence, the weight of those words settling over them. As the sky turned purple and the first stars blinked into view, Ethan stood up, stretched, and looked out over the darkened lanes. Tomorrow morning, he'd be back. No alarms needed. No promises made. Just him and the track. He took a deep breath, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a man who no longer chased motivation, but carried discipline in his every step. Then he walked home, the road stretching endlessly ahead of him, and he wouldn't have it any other way.